can have you.
Main event of the evening.
Motorcycle humps, ready to race to you.
These days are ours. These days are ours.
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing the second episode of the second season of the Fonz and the Happy Days gang, Kelp.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Kelp.
Ralph is tanning himself using a light fixture inside the time machine. Mr. Cool brings him the radio he asked for.
Boy, this is gonna be terrific. Wait till they see my tan back in Milwaukee.
But when the dog plugs it into the ship's control panel, despite Cupcake's protests, it overloads the circuits and the time machine crashes. To the gang's horror, the machine reports that they're 2,000 feet underwater. An underwater craft approaches them, and through the view screen, a man named Sea-Tax tells them they're trespassing in his area.
She's touching my special area!
He fires on their ship, knocking them into a hole. Satisfied, he returns to Aqua City. The time machine is approached by a sea monster resembling a manta ray, but instead of attacking them, its rider knocks on their door. She's a pretty lady who speaks to them telepathically.
How come we can hear you talking without seeing you move your lips?
All the people of Aqua City talk by thought when we're underwater.
And takes them to Aqua City, located within a massive bubble. According to Cupcake's time band, they're in the 38th century, and she speculates that the people must have adapted themselves to live underwater.
Boy, I'll tell you, what do they think of next?
Once they're inside her home, the woman introduces herself as Rhea, mayor of Aqua City. Her furniture is all made of gold, because it's the cheapest and most common material underwater. The alarms go off.
The alarms! It's Sea-Tax again!
That's the bozo who attacked us?
It's Sea-Tax, who Rhea describes as a rich surface dweller who wants to destroy their kelp farms for his mining. As the gang walks through the city, Ralph begins taking any gold that isn't nailed down, then a massive jewel from an interesting-looking machine.
Now this looks cultural.
Sea-Tax and his henchmen go after the gang, but Fonzie makes quick work of them. Then Sea-Tax shows off his new gadget.
Meanwhile, Mayor, I thought you might be interested in this.
A gold magnet that looks like a vacuum hose for mining the ocean floor. Rhea's only concern is how he got past the city's protective barrier, which it turns out is no longer working. That jewel Ralph took, that was its energizing crystal.
No wonder Sea-Tax was able to get in.
Using the magnet, Sea-Tax sucks up various gold objects from the city, including Ralph's sack of gold and Ralph himself. The gang vowed to rescue Ralph and get back the crystal. Rhea goes after Sea-Tax on her manta ray, followed by Fonzie and Mr. Cool in a mini-sub.
What do you got there? Emergency diving formula for working underwater without diving gear. This might come in handy. Very good work there, Cool.
Back in the city, Richie is commenting that Ralph got what he deserved, when he and Cupcake overhear Sea-Tax's guards.
Okay, now stay out of sight, like Sea-Tax said.
Richie speaks up against them, alerting them to his and Cupcake's location. Whoops. Cupcake tries to zap them, but it gets reflected back at them, leaving them in burlap sacks that they have to hop away in.
Don't just stand there, Cupcake. Hop!
Gotta get my zapper fixed.
Cupcake's next attempt to defend the two of them ends up trapping her and Richie in a cage. Whoops. Rhea, Fonzie, and Mr. Cool are intercepted by more of Sea-Tax's men. Rhea is captured, but manages to maintain telepathic contact with Fonzie.
You can find me. Just keep following my voice, Fonzie.
In the brig, she reunites with Ralph. When Fonzie and Mr. Cool make it to the ship joins with a giant pair of legs to become a super destructor and begin mining.
What is that thing?
What was that?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, we'll have you out of there before you could say, goodness gracious me.
The duo put the mini-sub in the path of the vacuum, sucking them in with the ore. They knock out two henchmen with the mini-sub's door, and steal their armor. Back in the cage with Richie and Cupcake, Cupcake accidentally creates a lizard monster.
Look on the bright side, Richie. Everybody's thinking about us, not the force field.
Sea-Tax demands that Rhea order her people to surrender to him. When she refuses, he orders the activation of the laser pulverizer. Fonzie fights off the henchmen, while Mr. Cool disgusts Sea-Tax by kissing him, causing him to drop the crystal. The gang try to escape the ship as Sea-Tax shouts that they'll be forced to watch Aqua City be melted into slag. He and his henchmen corner the gang, but Fonzie distracts them by causing a nearby pipe to burst. Thanks to what looks like gum, but is actually emergency diving formula, Fonzie, Mr. Cool, and Ralph escape alongside Rhea without drowning.
What is it, bubblegum? Emergency diving formula. Chew that, and even you won't drown. Come on, you too, Mr. Cool.
The Super Destructor follows to destroy Aqua City, while there's no force field. The gang arrive just in time to save Richie and Cupcake. Fonzie destroys the cage, and the monster goes after C-Tax's henchmen. Fonzie starts returning the crystal to the barrier generator. It's up to Cupcake to stall the super destructor. She zaps it, tying its legs together in a gigantic pink bow.
That is supposed to be something bad!
Unable to walk, it begins to fall towards the city, but before it can crush everyone, Fonzie gets the generator working, and it lands on the shield. An overjoyed Rhea dips Fonzie into a kiss.
On behalf of Aqua City, I'd just like to...
As Mr. Cool would say, rough, rough.
A small vessel escapes the super destructor. Over the view screen, C-Tax tries to swear revenge, but Fonzie turns it off with a snap of his fingers.
Right, Fonz! Tell him, Fonz!
Thank you, Peter. That was Kelp. It first aired back on September 19th, 1981. The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang was followed by a new Richie Rich Scooby-Doo show. This week, there's a parody of Pinocchio called Scooby-Nocchio, in which Scooby is tricked by a stranger into going to an amusement park called Pleasure Island.
3 tickets to Pleasure Island! Free!
His nose starts growing when he lies to Shaggy and Scrappy about how he got the tickets. CBS aired the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show, and NBC had a new episode of The Smurfs. This week, a baby dragon helps Papa Smurf locate some magical glowberries. So, Peter, of those 3 choices, what are you watching?
I think I'm going to go with Scooby-Nocchio. I do find it interesting that they introduced Scrappy-Doo as Scooby's nephew, his younger counterpart, and yet in this episode, it's Scooby who's taking on the role of the irresponsible liar when you think that would go to Scrappy because he's a puppy.
I was so intrigued by that plot summary that I actually tracked down Scooby-Nocchio online and watched it, and it is a very strange cartoon.
Is there an explanation for why lying causes Scooby's nose to grow when that has never happened before for him?
There's a spoiler for the whole thing if you want to know.
Is it all just a dream?
It's all just a dream.
It was all a dream.
Oh my god.
Kelp was directed by Ray Patterson, George Gordon, and Rudy Zamora. It was written by Diane Duane. Diane is a freelance writer originally from New York who worked in television from the late 1970s to the 2010s. She wrote for numerous animated series, including the Laverne and Shirley cartoon, plus
The Biscuits, Transformers, Batman the Animated Series, DuckTales, Gargoyles, and more.
But she's better known for her YA novels, including the Young Wizards series, plus a series of Star Trek novels that she co-wrote with her husband, Peter Morwood. She currently lives in Ireland. And I thought that this episode very much seemed like the product of somebody who went on to write sci-fi and fantasy novels. What do you think?
Yeah, this is not the first episode of the show that is science fiction or fantasy, but it is the first one that feels like it's not specifically just shouting out another piece of media. The 2 episodes previously where they time traveled into the future were The Farce Be With You, which was doing a lot of shout outs to Star Wars and other media inspired by Star Wars, and the one that was straight up just H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. You can definitely see influence from other stuff in this episode, but it also feels original in a way that those episodes were not trying to be.
Maybe this was some kind of story that she wanted to write anyway. She wanted to write about some underwater Aqua City or something, and she managed to work it into an episode of the Fonz and the Happy Days Gang. As for cultural and historical references, this episode's title is a reference to the 1965 film Help.
Filmed in colour, on location, very expensively, not in London.
The second of 2 films starring the Beatles and directed by Richard Lester. This one is an action-adventure spoof in which Ringo comes into possession of a sacrificial ring, which makes him the target of a mysterious cult. The cast includes Leo McKern, Victor Spinetti, Eleanor Braun, and Roy Kinnear.
The episode is titled after a couple of mentions that Rhea makes, that they have kelp farms, and that's how they survive underwater, that's what they eat. But the kelp farms never actually show up, and they're not really plot relevant. So naming the episode after the kelp farms is an interesting choice.
Did you want more kelp in Kelp?
Well, I think that if that is what your episode is titled, there should be more kelp.
When Ralph asks for his radio,
Hey, Mr. Cool, where's my radio?
Mr. Cool brings a 1930s cathedral radio, also known as a Gothic radio. Cathedral radios were among the first that were affordable enough to be available to the general public. Fonzie says, "What's the story, Morning Glory?" in a sing-song voice.
All right there, Cuppers. What's the story, Morning Glory?
Today, that expression is closely associated with the band Oasis and its 1995 album, What's the Story, Morning Glory. But I think Fonzie is probably referencing the song The Telephone Hour from the 1960 stage musical Bye Bye Birdie.
What's the story? Morning Glory. What's the word? Hummingbird. Did you kiss him and cry?
Did you think he was singing a little bit of The Telephone Hour when he did that?
Almost definitely yes. Even though, as we know, because these specific versions of the character are from 1957, that's an anachronism.
I don't know how he picked that up, but he did somewhere.
Maybe at one point they accidentally time traveled to 1960 and caught some of Bye Bye Birdie, and that's how they know.
They might be having adventures that we don't see. That's possible. Now, as far as I can tell, ridickle-dockle is not a common expression outside of this episode.
Come on, that's just plain ridickle-dockle here.
Yeah, ridickle-dockle.
That one is all Fonzie. I kind of expected ridickle-dockle to be something that people say, like, don't be ridickle-dockle, but it's not. Fonzie says, somehow I get the feeling that is not the welcome wagon.
What is that?
Well, somehow I get the feeling it is not the welcome wagon.
Since 1928, the Welcome Wagon has been sending representatives to the homes of new residents in a community and bringing them gift baskets containing free samples, coupons, and advertising from local businesses. I've moved to different places in my life, and my family moved to different places, and I don't think we ever once were visited by the Welcome Wagon. Have you ever known someone to be visited by the Welcome Wagon, Peter?
No, I didn't know that the Welcome Wagon was an actual thing. I thought it was always just a metaphor.
It's a real company. That's why it's capitalized.
Is it trademarked? Is it violating copyright to call yourself the Welcome Wagon if you're not part of Welcome Wagon LLC?
Possibly. They're probably not litigious, though, because it would go against their welcoming image. Cupcake briefly transforms herself into Little Bo Peep and Mr. Cool into a sheep.
Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep and doesn't know where to find her. Now that's reasonable, isn't it?
This is a reference to a nursery rhyme about a female sheep herder that goes back to at least 1805. The character's name is a reference to a British children's game called Bo Peep, which is similar to Peekaboo. The stick that she carries is called a shepherd's crook. Now, when people think of Bo Peep, they probably think of the Toy Story movies.
Unless you're me, in which case you think of that one episode of Once Upon a Time where Little Bo Peep is a warlord and she calls the people who work under her sheep.
You and your flock are safe as long as you pay me what's due.
Once Upon a Time is a weird show.
Rhea says that gold is plentiful in Aqua City. There may indeed be vast amounts of gold in the ocean and on the ocean floor, but just how much, we still don't know. It's in the millions of tons. Extracting this gold for our use has proven too expensive and difficult with current technology. Also, much of the gold is highly diluted. Aww. Ralph says that they're caught between SeaTac and the Deep Blue Sea.
Trapped between SeaTac and the Deep Blue Sea.
That's a reference to Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, a nautical expression from the 1600s, meaning to be trapped between two unpleasant options. The devil of the phrase refers to the longest seam on a wooden ship.
But I believe Diversity is an old wooden ship that was used during the Civil War era.
I was a little disappointed to learn that the devil in that expression was not the actual devil.
Yeah, that kind of makes it less fun.
Fonzie says Milwaukee was not built in a day.
Patience, you may, and this Milwaukee was not built in a day, you know.
This is a reference to the adage, Rome wasn't built in a day, which can be traced back to medieval France, circa 1190. The English version didn't appear until 1538. Other observations this week. Every episode of The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang begins with a little highlight reel and a voiceover by Henry Winkler inviting us to watch the rest of the episode. There were a couple that they used over and over during the first season. One that starts with,
"Hey, all right, this is the Fonz, listen up."
And another that starts with,
"Hey, yours truly, the Fonz here."
This episode has a new one. It starts with,
"Whoa, this is the Fonz at your service here."
Hearing a new intro to the show was like a magic trick for me, Peter.
Yeah. Everything is changing.
Aqua City is yet another civilization where we really only meet one resident. Where are the other blue-skinned people of Aqua City, Peter?
We get one shot where there are some indistinct-looking people in the background.
If you had one shot.
They are not blue. They have Caucasian skin tones, so I don't know what's up there. This is probably another case of we had the budget for 3 character designs, Rhea, SeaTac, and the henchman. Although we do actually get to see what one of the henchmen looks like under his armor in this episode. He looks like a shriveled old man. So that's fun.
SeaTax's guards are obviously voiced by Don Most and Ron Howard.
We don't know how you got in here, but you're coming with us, intruder.
I'm not sure why that is. Do you think it was a budgetary thing?
Probably, yeah. Maybe they wanted to do it because it looked like fun. Frank Welker makes it look like a blast.
Richie gets to say bucko this week, and Fonzie is still doing his your blankness bit that I talked about in the last show. This week it's your mayorness and your high and mightiness. So they're trying to turn that into a running joke. Speaking of jokes, Mayorrhea sounds to me like a kind of diarrhea only suffered by mayors.
I will say that I love the detail that this is the future, so she's the mayor of Aqua City. She's not like a queen or a princess or any other kind of monarch. The future will be democratic.
They've already done the hard part. All we have to do is vote.
This is my advice to Fonzie. Hey, Fonzie, maybe don't remind kids that they can change the channel.
You know the nice thing about TV? You can change the channel.
Don't tell the kids that.
He does it right at the end of the episode, so they've already watched the whole thing. They don't have anything to lose.
This story ends with the time machine still out of power and thousands of feet below water. They don't even begin working on any of these problems. What's going on there, you think?
I think the answer is that they either just ran out of time, or they figured, well, the audience can pick up on what the basic premise of the show is. They know the time machine is going to be okay. There was an entire episode that ended with them just watching as Merlin was turning their ship into all these other things. So you can probably grasp that off screen, they are going to fix their time machine. If Aqua City has energizing crystals, they can probably figure out Cupcake's ship's battery technology.
I guess to them, the time machine is a centuries-old relic, if you think about it, because it goes back to the 25th century, so it's already out of date.
Oh, you out of time, baby!
Now, there are some things that Cupcake says this week, but they're switching it up a little bit. They start with perilous plutons, which is a new one. She says cosmic calamities twice, but then Fonzie also says it. She only says moon craters once, but Richie also says it, and then Ralph and Richie say it, and all that is without Cupcake. And finally, she says suffering Saturn. They're using fewer catchphrases this week, and they're also using them in more innovative ways. There are some times when Mr. Cool makes things better this week, believe it or not. He accidentally finds the emergency diving formula that comes in handy later in the episode, and he retrieves the energizing crystal from SeaTax, so he does some good work. But there were some times when Mr. Cool makes things worse. Mr. Cool plugs a radio into the control panel, causing the entire ship to lose power. He does this even while Cupcake warns him not to.
Wait, Mr. Cole! I don't think the control panel can handle one more lug.
So that was very bad on his part. He briefly embarrasses Fonzie with his antics in front of Rhea, and he loses his armor at a crucial moment, giving away his identity and endangering Fonzie. That's the kind of thing he's been doing this whole show. Anytime that they're dressed up like the enemy to try to sneak around, Mr. Cool always screws that up for them.
Make it a stealth mission! You're causing a whole ruckus!
But here are the times when Mr. Cool suffers physically and mentally. Mr. Cool again struggles with those retractable chairs that are attached to the ceiling of the time machine. He opens a hatch and gets drenched by the water that flows in. The crystal lands on his head and gives him a lump, and he walks into a door. So pretty light week for Mr. Cool in terms of physical suffering. I have to ask you, Peter, about one of the cartoon tropes that we've now seen at least twice on the Fonz and Happy Days gang, and that is the trope of lumps appearing on characters' heads.
You get bonked on the head with a mallet and you get a big pink thing on your head.
Do you like that cartoon trope?
That's difficult to say. It's like asking me how I feel about someone slipping on a banana peel or getting a pie in their face. It's just so classic that I've never really thought about it.
You see, for me, it stands apart from those because slipping on a banana peel or getting a pie in the face, that's just good-natured fun. To me, the lump on the head thing is body horror because that's flesh growing up out of the top of your head. For some reason, to me, that has always kind of grossed me out when it's in cartoons, but maybe I'm alone in that. Maybe everyone else just sees a classic, silly cartoon gag. But, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Kelp?
I did really like Rhea's outfit. She's wearing like this kind of greenish blue bathing suit, and she's also got this tiara, because even though she's a mayor and not like a queen or something, it's always fun to wear a tiara.
Tiaras are good for any occasion.
I do like the helmets that SeaTax's henchmen wear. They kind of reminded me of World War I gas masks, kind of crossed with hazmat suits.
They were pretty cool looking uniforms. So, yeah, obviously SeaTax is putting some money into this operation. So, Peter, did you have any other observations you wanted to make about Kelp?
Man, this entire episode is basically Ralph's fault, right? He's the one who makes Mr. Cool get him a radio and plug it in for him, which causes the ship to break down 2,000 feet underwater. And he's also the one who opens up Aqua City to being attacked by Sea-Tax because he stole their energizing crystal. And also he just kept stealing all their stuff. And his rationale was like, well, if the city gets destroyed, we've got to preserve their culture. Like, wow, you little imperialist bastard. Come to think of it, I think that this episode might be a sci-fi retelling of It's a Jungle Out There. That's the one where they do make it back to 1957, but they end up in South America. They find an isolated city of pre-Columbian Amazons, and they end up having to help them protect their city from a pair of treasure hunters. In this case, Sea-Tax is the treasure hunter, and Aqua City is the Amazon city. That was also one where Ralph wanted to steal stuff.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yeah, this episode was a lot of fun. Like I mentioned, it feels more original than the previous future episodes. It moves at a very exciting pace. There's lots of fun sci-fi jargon like super destructor and laser pulverizer. And I also did think it was fun that Rhea was the one who took some initiative and dipped Fonzie into a kiss.
I think this episode really benefits from having a new writer come in and bring a new perspective to the show and try out new kinds of material. This really felt like Diane Duane imposing her own ideas and her own sensibility on this series rather than just trying to copy all the episodes that we've seen before. And I tend to like underwater stories. That's not a hugely common genre of fiction, underwater stories, but when we get them, I always find them intriguing, you know, those cities in bubbles and stuff.
The ocean is a massive and terrifying place. We are still discovering new things about it, and it's ripe for exploration and storytelling.
Hanna-Barbera must have been sort of interested in this because they did 2 underwater series that I can think of. Sea Lab 2020.
This is the year 2020. The place is the Challenger Seamount, the top of an underwater mountain.
And then the Snorks.
Come along with the Snorks.
Maybe they just like doing underwater stories. It's an interesting world down there. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow me on Blue Sky at peterwolfrank.bsky.social.
They can follow me on Blue Sky at joeblevins.bsky.social. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket next time we talk?
Next time, the gang get trapped in the Bermuda Triangle with a girl named Ula and her giant ape Mongo.
Mongo only pawn in game of life.
In Time Schlep.
That is a very intriguing plot summary, Peter. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
If you're looking for me, you better check under the sea, 'cause that is where you'll find me, underneath the sea lab, underneath the water. Sea lab at the bottom of the sea.
Kelp.
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 Kelp. Kelp.
Kelp. Kelp. Kelp.
Kelp. Kelp.
Kelp.
Kelp. Kelp.